All right, Alessandro and Jake, about last week, people released a ton of Red Dead previews for Red Dead Redemption 2. They got to play about 90 minutes of the game. They saw the train robbery and then a little bit of the open world, so people got to talk about it. There's a lot to unpack. We were actually lucky enough to see an extra 3.5 hours or so. We played right from the beginning of the game. We came into the demo, Rockstar had the game paused on the intro screen. We're not going to spoil anything with specific characters or events. We'll talk about general tone and how it might compare to GTA 5 or something, but we played for about 2 hours in the beginning and then more open world. Jake, I don't know, without spoiling too much, the beginning of the game, what did it feel like to you? Do you think it did a good job of introing you to the vast array of new ideas in this game?
Yeah, to be honest, it reminded me a lot of the beginning of GTA 5. When you start out in North Yankton and you're robbing that bank, it kind of introduces you to the gameplay mechanics, the driving, the aiming, all those kind of systems. And it is very similar to that in that you are kind of stuck in a blizzard and you're forced to, that's pretty much their opportunity to let you try out all these different systems. Mm-hmm. They kind of walk you through the different features that the game has. So very similar, except stretched out a lot. It's a lot longer because there is a lot more to this game.
Yeah, and it sets up the general story. You've seen it in trailers, the dying days of the the Wild West, the lawless frontier. It's coming to an end. You're meeting people. You are meeting a bunch of people. You got Dutch, you got Bill Williamson, you've got Javier Escuela is in it as well. So you're meeting your gang and whatnot, and it's kind of introing you to all these ideas. But also, I think the tutorial is pretty important because it's introing you to how many different social interactions you have, how many layers of detail there is to how you're interacting with this world. And more importantly, I think with Red Dead Redemption 2, it's how the world reacts to you, which is something that we say open world games do, but based on our preview, it's actually doing that this time. But Alessandro, I don't know, did you feel throughout the time we were playing the game, were you overwhelmed by the amount of things you could do, or do you think it eased you into it based on those first few hours? How were you feeling?
I think the intro definitely really helped, sort of easing us into the new mechanics. It was set during a blizzard, which, by the way, I really appreciate that Western is sort of utilizing snow, because that's something that's not really seen too often, Western fiction.
But a Hateful Eight kind of
exactly,
vibe.
Or even an older film like The Great Silence, which was a classic Western set in the snow. But setting it in sort of a blizzard, for one, the pace was a lot slower because we were, stuck in that blizzard, and we were just sort of moving very slowly and being very careful. But also, it sort of clued us in on some of the core mechanics, the actual core systems for the game. You have to keep track of your body temperature and stamina, and also the type of stuff you're wearing too.
Yeah.
So it was a very clever way of just sort of easing us into the new mechanics of the game.
Yeah, it's interesting too because a lot of people who played it, they were mentioning or didn't play the full thing, they only played that hour and a half. They were saying how overwhelming it is. And it was definitely overwhelming for us as well, but having that extra 2 hours or whatever to go through that tutorial, it helped a lot, and it really put into perspective how different this game is compared to previous Rockstar games and to most open world games we see today.
I was more, actually, if I'm being honest, I was more overwhelmed by sort of the scope of the world itself, because it seemed a lot more broad and more grand than the original game. And we definitely got to see that while we were actually exploring that first section where we're going through the mountains and sort of seeing the landscape, which looked fantastic.
The way it subtly changes from one biome to the next is pretty amazing to see. It'll be just this very snow-covered landscape, and then all of a sudden you'll see a few trees, and then you'll all of a sudden be in the middle of a forest, and of course you're coming across different characters that you're getting missions from. What about how you came across Sidequests? Jake, you went into a town at one point. Do you want to tell us some of the things that happened there? We were handing the controller back and forth, and Jake was quickly became the outlaw of us.
I want to start at the beginning before I get to the town where I just run my horse into another cart, and the guy was like, "What the F?" And I tried to calm him down, and he's like, "Forget it," and he just kept getting more and more annoyed, and I kept trying to calm him down, and then he left. Then I started killing people, and I was running around trying to stop witnesses.
So
it just kept snowballing.
It's that social trigger, left trigger. You can calm him, you can threaten him. The calming is pretty much dude, chill out, and then that pissed him off more. And then someone witnessed it when you two got in a gunfight, so you had to go chase them down. That happened to me as well. Remember, I think this dude's wife saw me kill him, and I had to do it. It wasn't out of any coldness in my heart. She ran away, so I fired a warning shot and then pointed my gun at her, and she's like, "Don't worry, I won't tell anybody." And then she left, and she still told the sheriff. I was pissed. I was like, I should have shot this person in the face. Like, that's what's. It feels like these NPCs are actually like other people have said it. It's kind of elevating these small emergent miscellaneous. In other games, they would be just like these miscellaneous quests, but it's elevating those like small encounters onto the same level as main story missions. They feel not authored. Like, it doesn't feel like Rockstar's hand is there, but like I think they're doing it so well that it feels like it's just you like playing with this world. But then you got like, I don't know, like you went toward town and like a few more things unfolded.
Well, I mean, I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but also the interaction I had with the guy from Mexico who's just like, hey, do you want to have a shooting competition?
Yeah.
And I was like, sure. And I lost, and he's like, all right, $5. And I just figured, like, in most games it'd be like minus $5, and he gave him up. So I figured that happened, and I just walked away, and he's like, what the hell? Like, where's my money? And I was like, what?
He's
and
like,
then,
what?
And then he pulled out his gun, and I just shot him a bunch.
Yeah, a bunch of times when he fell down and like got back up finally, and then he shot him at the top of that, and then took all of his money that he had won from, presumably betting other people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a bet. He's like, you shook on it. Where's my money? And you're like, I don't know. I thought I gave it to you. And then you're about to get back on your horse, and that's something you just came across. Like it's funny because we've been you've seen open world games or like games in general kind of going toward this player-driven emergent gameplay. This game really nailed that. I was kind of riding my horse through a forest. All of a sudden, I hear like this choking or like this retching, and all of a sudden, this guy stumbles out of this woods like with vomit. You could see vomit all over his shirt. Like I walk up to him. I'm like, "What's wrong?" And he's like, "Please give me some medicine." I give him medicine, and as he's like feeling better immediately, he's like, "Oh man, I was trying to find something to trip with, but don't eat the pink flowers, they're poisonous." But I didn't get anything out of that quest. There was no monetary reward, there was no gear or anything. There was no new quest line. That just happened and he walked away and we were all like, I don't know what that was about. And then you came across a guy in a bear trap, right?
Yeah, we found a guy like in the middle of the woods, like just in a bear trap, and of course you can use the social trigger, and for some reason, like I thought it was appropriate. I just said, "Hey, man, how's it going?"
he's like bleeding out. All of a sudden, he's like, "Hey, what's wrong?"
But of course, we could help him and get him out, and he'd be grateful. But actually, one of my favorite moments, like from our demo, was you all know exactly what I'm going to talk about. It's the guy on the hill, like in his tent, and when we encountered him, like this was like in the evening, and the rain was starting to come down, and we went up to him and. First thing he said was, "Hey man, do you have a girlfriend?" And I was like, I was very weirded out by it, and I think all of us were. But so I decided to react negatively, and I think this is maybe one of the rare cases where doing one sort of response will get the opposite from most people. Like, because I responded negatively the whole time, and he kept going, and it got more and more weird because he started talking about how he would spy on, sort of lonely women in the wilderness.
But this one specific widow, right?
Yeah, and we actually got a notification in our log saying, hey, there's this cabin nearby, maybe you should check it out.
Yeah.
So eventually I just had enough and I shot the guy because he was a total creep, and after that we saw a cabin down the hill, and I guess at first we thought it was related, so we just decided to go down there and check it out. And the rain was coming down, it was totally dark, and the only thing that was giving us light was sort of the lanterns around the cabin. And so we went into the cabin and we had to break down the door because it was locked. So as soon as we got in, entire family was dead. They were like, their bodies were like decomposing, and it was a really eerie scene seeing that.
To clarify, they weren't just like dead NPC bodies, they were rotting bodies.
Yeah.
So like, this didn't just happen.
Yeah.
Like you could tell that it was like a long time ago.
Yeah, and experiencing that, along with the creeper on the hill, like even though those were totally isolated encounters, like experiencing that one after the other sort of created this sort of cohesive like story. Like just the wilderness can be really creepy.
Yeah, and like you mentioned how a notification popped up, and like the way they justify that, it's pretty much Arthur Morgan writing in his journal. So like you can read his journal and hear about like something that went down in Blackwater or whatever that like screwed with the gang and they haven't forgotten about it. Or
he makes sketches too, actually.
Yeah, and he sketches stuff. It's kind of like it's a much more in-depth, like Nathan Drake does it in Uncharted, kind of something like that.
Also L.A. Noire.
L.A. Noire, same thing. Yeah, exactly. What is it? Cole Phelps in that game does it. It all, like, I like what you said about it. The thing that struck me from these like 5 hours we played in the course, like this one morning we went over to hang out with Rockstar, it didn't feel like, we did 3 story quests, we did 3 side quests, we did like 4 miscellaneous quests. It's like, no, we just played for 5 hours and we have a story about those 5 hours. We don't have an individual, like, it's not just mission and then traveling and then mission. It's you know, the
Everything
traveling
in
itself
between.
is part of the game. And, you know, like Zelda Breath of the Wild got toward that, more toward that. You know, like, I mean, like GTA 5 was trying that to some extent, you know, but like now it feels more like, again, they kind of elevate that, the side quests up onto the same level as the main story, to the point where like, you don't feel like you're missing out if you're doing this minor quest, because you have no idea what's going to come out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Breath of the Wild is like a good comparison in that that game is so based around emergent gameplay and the things that happen. But I think the biggest difference that Rockstar is doing is that that emergent gameplay extends to those interactions that you come across. Like, it's going to play out differently for everyone depending on whether or not your gun is up, whether you're covered in mud, whether you're bloody, like depending on what situation. Like, is he in a bear trap? Like, he's going to respond differently. I'm not entirely sure like how random or how varied those will actually be when the game comes out, but based on like the 5 hours we played, just seeing like the diversity of those interactions was staggering.
It's funny because, you know, you talk about like how when you look at like Divinity Original Sin 2, as an RPG, it's obviously very gamey. It's turn-based combat and whatnot, and like it's an isometric view. But to a certain extent, like it's hard to find the boundaries of what you can't do. It felt very much like each small thing was connected in the story. Like every little detail was connected, and like it's easy to say it's a detailed world, but it's also just like how each layer, it doesn't even feel layered. It feels like it's just one big game that all matters. And that was the most impressive thing, I think.
Yeah, even like small things, which I think people have already talked about by now, but even small things like how much you eat, like whether or not you keep yourself clean, like that will all like feed into something, like interactions with NPCs or whatever, and I think that is super interesting.
Yeah, and even just, it's fun to just travel on your horse, and you can like,
It's also funny to biff it on the horse too.
let's not talk about that. I broke the horse's legs on accident because I went off a cliff and I hurt myself, and yeah, you get those cores, and the horse's stamina and health cores were just down all the way.
Yeah,
I fed him a carrot.
You had to use a special item to
Yeah,
actually
tonic
revive.
you can make or whatever.
You know, Alessandro like ran into a tree.
Oh.
Like it was like one of those classic moments where like, all right, in most games it's not going to hit the tree.
Yeah.
Like he's just going to weave
Yeah.
by itself, or it's just going to be awkward. But
No,
he just ran right into
I
it.
hit that tree. I felt so bad for the horse too, because I was like, that was a really bad hit. I'm so sorry.
I really, really like that the West the world itself very much. It sounds cliche, but it is a character. It's interacting with you, and it's one thing to be playing open world games, and for the developer to make a world that makes you react to it. It's another thing, like when we played Red Dead, that the world feels like it's reacting to you, and that's something we've always not always, that's something we've been saying about open world games.
Yeah.
But again, it's kind of like, you know, like sometimes it feels like we're being hyperbolic. Like the world isn't actually reacting to you. It's not dynamic or immersive. It feels like Red Dead is earning those cliched terms we've been using for the last like 5-10 years. And that's only based on 5 hours. Like who knows? October 26th could roll around and the game could be okay. But based on what we played, it seems pretty impressive. Like everything we saw just felt like it was it was reacting to our choices, and not just like binary like Paragon Renegade choices like, oh, I forgot that I picked up that gun and that was that dude's gun, so now he's pissed. Like,
Yeah, another interesting little tidbit that happened was in that final mission I played. I don't know if you remember, but there was that one guy who was like, "Oh, I gotta pee," and they were like telling you should like sneak up on him.
yeah.
So I start to sneak up on him, and they're still having a conversation. I didn't realize it.
he was talking, right?
Yeah, he was like still talking to his two other friends or whatever. And you were like trying to stop me. You're like, wait, you should wait until they're done talking. But I didn't hear you, and went up and stabbed him, and they reacted. And I was like, why did they react? Like they weren't looking. But of course, like this is supposed to be more grounded. He was mid-sentence talking to his friends, so his friends were like, what the fuck just happened?
Yeah, he's like, remember that time back, and then all of a sudden they're like, what the hell's going on with him? But
And then Arthur just with a knife in his throat.
yeah, and that's the thing, like pre-Breath of the Wild, maybe, again, like to make a not so obvious comparison, whatever, but like I don't think I would have thought of that, but I think that was like pretty far into our demo. So
Yeah,
at
that was
that
at the very
point,
end.
I think we were all kind of, aside from you at that point, I'm joking, we were all attuned to the fact that this game is accounting for everything. And like, you know, you've got a ton of Rockstar developers working on this game. It's fair to assume there's going to be polish and there's going to be like, they're going to account for those decisions. But it's not, when we say player choice, it's not even like, this game is more of a role-playing game than like most RPGs nowadays. Like again, there's like Divinity is there, but most times when you say RPG, we mean just progression and binary choices and whatnot, or branching choices. This doesn't feel like a branching storyline. It feels like it's just like this mesh or web of possible things that we can come across, and it feels really daunting in a good way so far.
I think it also speaks to the fact that Rockstar has a very particular way of approaching open world games. Even though this is a sequel to Red Dead Redemption, it's also on a mechanical level a sequel to Grand Theft Auto 5, and pretty much every other game they've also worked on in the past. They've even reincorporated the sort of sex appeal aspect from San Andreas, like where other characters will react to basically how you present yourself. During one moment, I think during the bar fight, one of the NPC characters said, hey, pretty boy.
Yeah, and Jake had just shaved and groomed his hair and stuff, and then Rockstar was telling us, if you let your hair grow out too much and if you eat too much and you don't clean up, your gang members and your camp members will start being like, dude, this hygiene thing is a problem.
Yeah,
we have to
pull
talk to
you
about
aside
it.
and be like, hey,
clean up.
you smell bad. You're bringing down morale.
So like on a lot of levels, the game is accounting for player choice, but it's also accounting for a lack of player choice. Like it's like you're not just like exploring the world. At this point, you're being lazy, and the game is accounting for that, and that's pretty impressive. And yeah, it's worth considering that this is the biggest gap that Rockstar's ever had between major releases. Like GTA 5 was 2013. Since their founding in '98 or something, they haven't had this big of a gap between releases. And so far, we can tell, like how much polish there is and how much time they've put into it, or how much work they put into that time. But got exactly 3 more weeks from today until we get to play the game when it releases on PS4, Xbox One.